This week's podcast guest is here to help you make peace with your body and mind and become the strongest version of yourself. She is the creator of the Body Love Soul Method, which is a 10-week group empowerment coaching program that covers a variety of topics from emotional eating and nutrition to female hormone health, self-compassion, and more. She is a personal trainer, fitness instructor, certified healthy mindset coach, precision level 1 coach, the board of director president of the Soul Project, and the host of the Make It Make Sense podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Izzy Atkinson.
Yay!
Woo!
I love very excited to be here.
Your podcast name is so cute.
Thank you. There's so many reasons why I named it that. I swear it's my catchphrase. I'll always be like, make it make sense. Like, why is this happening? And then a year later, I'm like, I know why that happened. And now I'm going to talk about it.
I love that so much. How you doing today?
Really good. I mean, I can't believe it's already December and we're like in the thick holiday season, but really good. Excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. And it's so funny, like we've kind of known each other in like just in connecting circles here and there in Boston, but I haven't seen you in forever. I haven't talked to you in forever. I feel like I just like know bits and pieces of your life from Instagram. So I'm excited to like dive into all of it because you do so much and you're doing so much cool shit. Sorry, Aunt Debbie, for swearing again. But we also, it was funny, like when I was looking at your website and kind of just like, okay, what do we want to talk about today? We have so many like aligned values. And you talk a lot about how, I can't remember if it was in your Body Love Soul method or one of the other millions of things that you're doing, but talking about the power in talking about the stuff we think we're the only ones like going through. And that was one of the biggest pushes that Caitlin and I had to start this podcast, like the power of just storytelling and being able to like relate to people in ways that like, oh, I thought that was just me. So why don't we just kind of start from the beginning and have you tell your story a little bit? Like, I know whether it's, you know, a new grad that's listening that is feeling pressure to follow a certain path, or maybe someone older that feels like I can't start something new. Like, I feel like you are the queen of knowing that you want to do something and like making it happen. So I just feel like you have so much to share. So I'll shut up.
That's such a nice intro. I'm like, thank you. I know it's crazy because I was thinking about this myself. Just the other day, I was having a conversation with someone and I was like, I'm constantly trying to come up almost my elevator pitch because I do wear so many hats. So I guess to think about like my story really is I've had a typical kind of 9-to-5 job for almost 10 years now, but I was always wanting more. Like I always have been a passionate, multidimensional woman, but I always thought that was actually a problem with me for a really long time. I used to be like, why can't I follow a straight line? Like why? And so I resisted that for a really long time. And then it was through fitness. Ultimately, I share a lot of my podcasts about my background in fitness and my relationship with movement. It was through the fitness sort of path that I took that started expanding me into these more entrepreneurial endeavors and just different things essentially. So about 6 years ago, I pursued my personal training certification. I became a trainer. I started working at a boutique gym. I quit my corporate job. I was making no money. And so I called my corporate job back up and I'm like, okay, how can I do both of these things? And I'm so lucky because they were super supportive of that. They were like, we want to support you. You know, I was running boot camps out of my office. They were like totally on board with it. Let us help you, help us type situation. So I started doing both and that was really exciting. But I always knew that why I was in fitness was to empower women. Like that was the overarching high level mission. I'm in fitness because I want to empower women. And so the more that I immerse myself into the industry and training and working with clients and teaching classes, I started having these vulnerable, just sort of conversations with people in my classes or that I was training, and talking about it on my social media about body image and vulnerability and, what it looks like to stand in your power. And it was really through those conversations that I felt almost these universal nudges being like, okay, Izzy, like, do more of this, find ways to do more of this. And so then I think, fast forward to 2020 when the world shut down and obviously the fitness industry became a totally different place. We're
Mhm.
like nodding our heads. Yeah, really weird time. And I invested in a business coach and I decided to create an online program, the Body Love Soul Method. At that point, I had been, in the body image space, talking about it, working with women anyways, one-on-one at that point. I had done a certified healthy mindset coach certification I had shared about. It just felt like the natural next step for me. I was so passionate about it. That became really successful, Body Love Soul Method. I loved it. And then it just, over time, again, sort of finding my desire to want to have my hands in other things. And so from the Body Love Soul Method, the Wildflower Project happened, which was events in Boston for women to come together and talk about, empowerment, vulnerability, all the different things we go through. And I've just really been on this path where I trust my intuition, and it ends up leading me oftentimes to something in the moment that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then it ends up making a lot of sense.
Make it
Hence my
make sense.
podcast name. Exactly. Make it make sense. So I found myself where now the hats I really wear are working in the body image space, but I've become, the board president of the nonprofit, the Soul Project. That's something I've been involved in now for probably 5 or 6 years. So everything I'm doing, it really comes down to I'm empowering women and working with women in like multiple different capacities, whether it's through fitness, through body image coaching, through, now I'm doing permanent jewelry for fun as a side hustle. Like it's all these different things, but everything I'm doing ends up being that I'm connecting and working with really incredible women. So it's awesome. I guess that was a long sort of rambly intro
Not at
sort of,
all.
but to circle back to what you said, I think for anyone feeling lost or feeling like they need to follow a clear-cut path or what is my calling or what should I be doing? I mean, I still have that conversation with myself almost every single day. Like, why am I doing all these 800 things? What's the purpose? Where are they going? But I really do always say to people, truly continue to trust what your instinct and intuition and passions are telling you. I think something that stuck with me so much lately, I still have a full-time job in corporate America, and I have an amazing boss. And I think she's in her late 50s. She was saying, I can't wait to retire to actually find out what I want to do with my life.
Oh,
And I was like,
it's a dagger
this
to the
just
heart.
yeah, it just reinforced why I continue to just follow my heart and my intuition and what drives me from a passion place, because you're going to keep finding things that align for you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love all of that. That was not rambly at all. There is like so much that I want to unpack, and I saw Caitlin over there taking notes, so I'm sure that she has a bunch that
I
she.
like write everything. So if I'm like da da da, and it just to like keep my mind straight, you're
No,
just so
I love it.
inspirational. And I'm like writing down quotes even of what you're saying. I'll pipe in, Amanda, with your questions, but I'll let you go first because I'm a rambling mess. I need to get grounded.
No, I love it. Okay, so you were talking about this on your podcast recently, actually, something you just mentioned, like learning to trust yourself and trust your intuition. So that way, when you feel those like pulls or those like messages from the universe or your intuition or however you want to look at it, you can be more confident in the decisions that you make in life. But I feel like that sounds like such a lovely place to be, and people say stuff like that all the time. But can you talk a little bit about like the process of getting there, like some of the work that you have done on yourself? And I know it's so much bigger than something we can just sum up in a few sentences, but
Yeah, I agree with you. I think even the way I can talk about it, sometimes it seems like, oh, this is so easy and great. And it's like, I actually went to the depths of hell and back every
yeah.
time I'm making a scary decision or choice. I think, sort of looking back on again, sort of my path, there was all these different steps that intuitively, for some reason, I felt called to pursue that ended up taking me to the next step. So something I even shared about when I was speaking at something last year was I wanted to work in the fitness industry, but I didn't really know the path. So something in my intuition told me, go reach out about working at the new Lululemon opening in Boston. Like there was always these steps that I sort of had to take in the interim to get me to the goal I was working towards. And I think a lot of times we get really caught up in just the end goal and just how am I going to get there? Something my intuition has taught me is when I get these, just these sort of subtle hints of, well, why don't you try that thing? Because I have a feeling it's going to be important on the path that you're going on, that I will say, you know what, I'm going to give this a try. I have nothing to lose. That's a lot of times my attitude. I have nothing to lose. Or, I'm going to learn something from this experience. But I think on a bigger level, when it comes to intuition and trusting yourself and building that confidence, is I talk about this a lot, that it's like flexing any muscle and you have to learn to do it. And sometimes, I mean, even when you think about working out, sometimes you have workouts that are really hard and they're uncomfortable. Maybe you didn't hit the squat benchmark you were looking to like hit that day or something like that. It's similar with the journey of trusting yourself. Sometimes you are going to fall on your ass. And it's a matter of like picking yourself up again and continuing to rebuild in that process. I share very candidly in my podcast that I went through basically a divorce about 2.5 years ago. And the way that ripped my life apart. But the entire journey was 100% about self-trust. Every step of the way. I look back in the last 2.5 years, and every act of everything was an act of self-trust. And every step, when I was actually taking it, was petrifying and scary and a lot of times overwhelming. But I think the relationship with trust and intuition is, there is some reason you're being called to do something. It isn't at random that we get this kind of overwhelming sense of like, I should do this, or I should try this, or I should go there. And then you end up looking back, and that's where you learn to build the trust, because you look back and say, oh my God, that makes so much sense why I did that. So even when I like half moved to California and uprooted my entire existence last fall, which was absolutely insane, I look back and I'm like, that was on full act of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so painful coming back after, but everything that happened, I had to learn, I had to go through. It got me to where I am today. The relationship I'm in, like every single thing, there was so much from that moment. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but I think it's about leaning into learning that all these different things, they do fall into place and they're teaching you something, and trusting what your inner voice tells you versus what someone else might be telling you is really important.
Yeah, totally. Which can be hard because I feel like we have so many mixed messages and like we're just constantly being flooded with information all the time, whether it's like societal things or like TikTok and Instagram and what everyone else is doing and all of that. Well, I was gonna say, when you mentioned like, yeah, sometimes you're gonna fall on your face, but then it's gonna reroute you to something. I was gonna ask, like, can you talk about a time where you quote unquote fell on your face or felt like, you hit that wall, whether it's maybe that breakup or something else?
100%. I think the two examples that like stand out to me the most right now is the breakup was a huge thing. We were together almost a decade. Like I get into this a lot in my podcast, and mind you, intuitively, I knew that wasn't the relationship for me. And so this is again something that on a universe level, let's say, I knew I was being taught so aggressively, as I had known for a while that wasn't for me. But I was so scared to like trust what what was going to be on the other side, which believe me was a lot of stuff that I was like not ready to go through.
Yeah.
But that is the funny thing with intuition and life and trust as well, is that a lot of times we'll ignore that thing. We all know it, like there be that thing,
Yeah.
whatever it is circulating in your mind, your body, and we're like, whatever. And then eventually it just steamrolls over you, because they're like the universe. I'm obviously woo woo. The universe is
We
like,
both are. It's fine.
yeah. They're like, honey, you can't ignore this anymore. So now we're just going to smack you in the face with it. Good luck. And I swear to God, that was totally what happened in my relationship. Yeah, I really fell on my face after that relationship. We were living together, all that stuff. I was broke when we broke up, partnership, all these things. I was broke when we broke up. I had like 2 pieces of furniture in my new apartment. That was a total disaster. Everything was falling apart in my life. Everything at that time. Like I just was a total hot mess. And I'm like, how can I even trust in this process? I was making so many like choices that were so out of bounds for me, so out of alignment with who I am.
Like what kind of choices? Like, what do you mean? If you don't
So,
mind me asking.
no, I don't. And it's funny. I'm such an open book. I actually thought about guiding more into this on an episode of my own in my podcast. You can't make
We're getting
this.
the hot exclusive here.
Yeah. You really can't make this stuff up. I do talk about this theme in my podcast of like I've been in pretty unhealthy relationships in my life with men in partnerships, whatever. And I had like a very toxic ex that I had been with prior to when I was with my last serious partner that I was with for almost a decade. And the timing of this is so insane. Like as my relationship is crumbling, that toxic ex like reaches out to a friend of mine, right? And long story short, we don't need to get into all the details. The point is when I got out of my very long-term relationship, I fell into the lap of that toxic ex. I was drinking and driving. Like I was partying I was being crazy.
Yeah.
I was making decisions that I had worked like I had done so much healing actually from that super abusive relationship. And then I fell right into it because I was so desperate to be like loved and validated. But it taught me. So the point of all of this is that was one of the most painful things I did after the breakup, because then I had to sit with the fact that I had then done that. And how could I have done that when I had healed so much, learned so much? It was an act of betrayal to myself. But I look back and I'm like, honestly, that was really meant to happen when it did, because the way that taught me so much about myself and so much about the breakup with that very long-term ex of mine. It's like it was all meant to happen that way, even though it was incredibly messy. Just like me being broke, me crying on my bathroom floor with no furniture. I had to learn to rebuild. Like I had to learn to reevaluate so many things in my life. And then I think about, and all of that again, leaving that relationship was an act of self-trust. And so in some ways at the time, I thought I was being punished. I'm like, why is the universe giving me all these hard things? Why am I making all these decisions out of alignment? But I look back and I'm like, they were absolutely what I actually had to go through at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And then I go to like the second example would be when I did go to California. I uprooted my whole life. I quit personal training. I quit teaching. I stopped coaching. I put like a couple pieces of furniture in storage. I sold all of my stuff. My parents took my dog. Like I was like, I'm going. And when I got to California, I mean, it was amazing. It was a healing experience that I needed. I knew I was called there for some reason, to which at the time I couldn't figure out. But coming back, that's where I got slapped in the face like 800 times. I couldn't find anywhere to live. I was broke again. I was like living out of my parents' tiny guest room with a futon with no heat. Like it was awful. And then sometimes living on my sister's guest bedroom. Just so many things were going wrong. I felt like I couldn't catch a break. All these things were going on with my dog's health. I was, like I said, broke again. But I look back now, and it was so many of those painful, disruptive moments after I thought I had done something really good for myself. Like, again, why am I being punished? That was my mentality. Is through those painful experiences, I saw a lot of stuff that I needed to see around my family dynamics, which like I had been working on healing in California. So it's interesting when you look at your life and experiences of how things I claimed like I'm going on a healing journey. I want to heal trauma. I want to heal this. I want to heal my relationship with myself, all these things. And it's almost like you do the work and then it's like, how do you see it and implement it? And so that's what I look back and feel like really happened to me when things are really falling apart. That's what I look back at now and feel like was happening for me. And again, forcing me to rebuild on my own, on my terms, totally independent. And so those are two really big moments where stuff was like so clearly guided, then so incredibly painful, but like so beautiful on the other side, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I feel like when, like, okay, taking it to like the breakup example, because that feels like an easy one to
Yeah.
relate to. Like, not a 10-year relationship or anything that like traumatic, but still, I feel like I went through a breakup and then similar things where I felt like I was just being like, I made this really strong decision that I felt so good about. And then right after, that's when you get kind of like slapped in the face with by the world and life and all of that. And again, you're like, yeah, why is this happening to me? But it almost, I feel like if you look at it as like a test, so like your toxic ex comes back around
For
and like
sure.
maybe for a second you just, went with it
Yeah.
because you're going through stuff and you're feeling
Yeah.
lonely. But really, you could look at that as like a test from the universe or a test for
Mhm.
yourself to be like, oh, okay, no, that is not me anymore. That's what I used to do, but I'm choosing to make this decision to like be
Mhm.
this different person. And that can be a beautiful way of looking at some of that hard stuff too. Like, you're
Mhm.
not going to just become that new person overnight because you just decide like, well, I'm here. Like,
Right.
no, you're going to be challenged and have to show up as that person, even when like it sucks.
100%. I could not agree more. The make it make sense catchphrase truly came from me because my super close friends would be laughing listening because after my breakup, that's what it was. It was every single toxic guy from my past. It's like every few months
I
they
know.
would be like, no, they would like get sprinkled in. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, have you learned? Trust me, I made so many, but so many decisions, especially the first year after the breakup that I'm like, how am I allowing myself to be treated this way? But to your point, I think that these are tests, but they're also lessons and learnings. I think a lot of times with a breakup, if we go with that example,
Mhm.
it's such a self-worth thing. Like you're going through a huge break. It doesn't matter. You could be with someone 6 months, 6 years. It's devastating. And when you go through a breakup, I especially think for women, for me, it was like a total self-worth thing. I mean, when I went through my breakup, I was like, I was not chosen to be married to. Like, I am literally not being chosen by somebody. This is
Mhm.
activating my self-worth wound to the nth degree. And then I kept finding myself in situations though, and dating experiences and, kind of mini relationships, whatever you want to call it, where I was continuing to reinforce that narrative though, by choosing people that weren't choosing me or were treating me poorly. And so I think to your point with these tests that come in, it's like learning each time again, sensing those things and continuing to stand in your self-worth, which can be really hard and really foreign and even really uncomfortable. That was a big part of all that stuff that came up for me in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we can get off the breakup topic in a second because we have, so many other like really cool things that you're doing
Wait,
that
Mandy, can
talk
I
about.
ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm burning over here.
And you
So
just
first,
ask
I need to
them.
toot your horn because I'm literally so intrigued with you. I feel like you have so much wisdom, and I've mentioned this before. Of you were just talking about like you learn these things in life, but now I need to live by them, and that's such a place of living in wisdom. And I think that a lot of people get caught up on that, and that's not talked about enough. As we learn these lessons in life, but you're really living by them. So I feel like I just wanted to brag about you for a second.
Oh, thank you.
And then the second thing, I do have a couple questions, but one thing I keep like making note about, you had mentioned that you went back and forth, but at one point you just like quit your job.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of our listeners and our friends always talk about like, I'm in this miserable job. I hate it. And not that you were in that place, but you just had this passion that you wanted to go for. But I'm just curious, like, what made you just make that decision? Like
Mhm.
make it make sense, but it doesn't logically or
Yeah.
by the numbers. Like, I can't make this look good on paper. Like, I'm not going to be able to pay my bills, but like, I freaking hate my job. But
Mhm.
intuitionally, like, you just know you have to do it. Like, how do you?
Such a good question. I'm actually really glad you asked that because I don't feel like I talk about this stuff enough with my like corporate career. So I've been at my firm almost 10 years. I hated the dynamic I was in with my boss. Wonderful man, but like workaholic, no boundaries. I was working like a dog. I would come home in tears all the time, burnt out, all the things, not making a lot of money, like everything you're talking about. And I had this passion on the side, right, for fitness, connecting with women, all these different things. And I intuitively, of course, knew like this is a part of my path. I have to find a way to start doing that work. So I guess to answer the question, when people are in this position, like, do I just quit? Do I just make it happen? What do I do? I don't have enough money to pay the bills. Like, there's all these factors at hand. For me, I started making steps of an exit plan before the exit in some ways. So I was working, I was exhausted, but I was really good at my job. And so that was something that I started to really leverage, and not in a way that was like, I'm above anyone or entitled. I started to use that to my advantage of saying, like, I am really good at my job and it would be detrimental to you guys if I left. Therefore, I'm going to be signing off at 5 o'clock because I'm going to get a part-time job at Lululemon. It was things like this where I started saying, how can I integrate the things that I love while still having this security blanket, because I'm not ready to give this up financially yet. I'm just not there, right? Like you said, we have to pay our bills. Like, we have to survive. So I started finding ways, how can I implement things along my passions while still making this work for me? And the more that I started putting energy into the passion things that I loved, I was like, wow, this ain't for me. Like, what am I doing? And I guess the biggest piece of advice though, and something that when we talk about the self, I feel like my life's work is in some ways about like a self-worth journey and then spreading it to other people. Because when I started at my corporate job, I was the worst in my role. I was being bullied by other women. No one respected me there. I didn't have the high pedigree education that like everybody else did. It was a total, like, it was not a good experience. And I remember being like, you know what? I'm going to prove everybody wrong here. And so once I started thriving in my role, like I said, was able to leverage how good I was at my job, my reputation within my role. And I actually ended up creating an entirely new role based off of what I was doing. And we structured a whole team. And this is all based off of me advocating for myself. No one was doing it for me. My own boss was not advocating for me because he was like shy. And like, I had to really be like, you know what? I know that I'm really effing good at this job. So I'm going to actually write an entirely new job description. I'm going to change my hours. So part of it is like, when you're in those scenarios, can you at least find ways where you can continue to advocate for yourself if you're in a situation that isn't optimal? That made it more sustainable for me, and it allowed me to start pursuing my passions more. And then when I decided to just fully quit, it was something where it's so crazy. It was at the moment of a huge promotion I got there. And I was like, you know what? I actually don't want to keep working for my boss. Like, why? I know that I created this promotion for myself. I don't even want to work for this guy though anymore. What am I doing? But I exited in such a respectful, like, my exit there was like months long. I really made sure they were set up for success, all these things. And so then when I did pursue fitness full time, I was in a relationship at the time. I will say that that helped to a certain degree. I had a partner, so it's not like I was the only one supporting our household financially. But when that wasn't working out and I actually wasn't getting the respect I deserved, I was working at Burn by Ray in Seaport. I wasn't getting the respect or the pay that I deserved there. I went back to my firm and I was like, let's have a conversation of how this can work. And at that point, I had built up such a strong reputation, the way that I had even exited, like, other partners there were like dying for me to join their team. So I was able to leverage working remote pre-COVID for an entirely new office and making my own hours. So all of this is to say, when you're in a shitty situation, look for the avenues that you can make it potentially a better situation for yourself. I got creative. None of these things existed at my job. I still do things at my full-time job that no one else does because I just advocate for myself and my experience and my knowledge. But no one at my job taught me that. So sometimes people ask me like, how are you so confident in these things? And I'm like, something in my body just tells me like, speak up, advocate. I don't know. And so I think that that's ways when you're in those situations. And then I think pursuing your passions, find ways that you can start to trickle that into your current lifestyle. Go get in the rooms with other people that are doing things similar to you. I can't stress that enough. And like Amanda said, we've known each other in a couple different avenues. And Amanda and I've certainly been in rooms like that. Like I'm constantly like, maybe I'm not at this table yet, but if I want to be at the table, I need to get into this room either way. And I was always showing up to spaces that I was not ready to be in. And so I think that that's really important. Just like putting out a podcast, you're like, maybe no one's going to listen, but I just need to do it. So I think that's so important for people that feel stuck or unfulfilled. Like start noticing what are the things you like, what are the things you're drawn to, who are the people you aspire to be like, how can you advocate for yourself better at your job to make it more fulfilling for you in the meantime. Like so much of the energy we focus on is external, it's other people, versus if I'm not in a great situation, how can I at least make it better for me while I'm here? I think is the narrative that really empowered me in my corporate career.
It's so powerful. And I feel like you gave actual ways to go about it, which is also so helpful instead of just like, just go with it. Like, I love that you gave actual examples of like, no, put some healthy boundaries up and know your worth. I think that it's so powerful. And as women, we don't often give ourselves space for that. And so go girl, go girl.
Oh, thank you. It's so important. And like, I was even making friends with people in my job years ago where I candidly remember one day even asking a couple other women in my role, like similar age to me too. I'm like, what's your salary? Like, can we just talk about, like, these are things that people they weren't talking about. And so I think sometimes, again, we have to lean into the things that make us uncomfortable. Like we're all so scared to like open that box or be vulnerable, but it's changed my life every single time I do it. So I just can't stress enough to anybody in any avenue of their life, like open that door, have that
Why are we all
conversation.
so afraid of like talking about finances and money? It's like, I don't have, it doesn't matter how much you're making, if you're making more or less than me, but like, why can't we just talk about these things? We're not in competition. We're trying to help each other. And if you have a conversation in that light, it's so much different.
Yes, 100%.
Absolutely. I also feel like, at least from my experience in like the corporate world, and maybe things have changed since, but like a lot of the jobs I was at, it was very much like the you're lucky to be here attitude, which is very toxic. And like, I think if you're going into a job and that's kind of the mindset, like that's kind of a red flag. But
Yeah.
how did you kind of start to learn to advocate for yourself, especially if, you know, you're working for someone that is a workaholic and maybe you butt heads a little bit. Maybe that's a person that's not going to understand why you even need to advocate for yourself or isn't used to hearing someone do that. Like, do you have any advice at all on like
No.
just how to rip that band-aid off? We're not taught that like ever.
Yeah. No, we're not. God, and I look back at my younger self and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
little Izzy was so naive at the beginning. I mean, part of it was that burnout caught up to me so aggressively that I couldn't escape it in some ways, right? Like I look back, hindsight 2020, burnout was so real for me. I was leaving work fatigued, emotionally drained, crying a lot, working on the weekends. Just like there was never a break. You know, no one was respecting like, don't contact me on my cell phone in these hours, like this and that. So there was that piece where my body quite literally had a reaction, right? We all have probably experienced burnout at some point in our lives. We know what it feels like. And at that point, you're like getting sick. For me, it was like I was getting sick. I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do, which at the time was like movement. And so that was a part of it. And then I think because my kind of initial first few months, especially at my full-time job, where I was very bullied by a lot of the women at my firm when I got there.
That's crazy. Like,
I
what
talked,
are adult
yeah,
women doing?
it's so crazy. I talked about this in my last podcast. I talked about like, don't be a mean girl in my last podcast episode. And the stories I could tell, there's just so many.
I think we all can.
Oh, yeah. And in corporate America, it's crazy because similar to kind of what Amanda said, like I actually prepared myself to go into this toxic environment. And maybe there's a lot of like, you know, that strong, aggressive ego male energy. Not at my, like at my firm, it was like the mean women. It was crazy. But I think with my specific situation with my boss at that time, he was an underdog at the firm. He was new. He was a workaholic. He was shy. He was socially awkward. like quite literally all these things. Our team thriving internally really started to happen because of me, because I was an extroverted person. I could juggle a lot. Like there were things that really highlighted my strengths, and I started to pick up on those things with myself. And so I think like I had to start noticing, okay, these are my strengths, and how can I keep leaning into and advocating for these things more? And that helped me start to, I basically also realized like I had this moment one day where I was like, my boss he can't survive without me. So he needs to start respecting me.
Mhm.
And how can I expect him to respect my boundaries when I have none with
Mhm.
myself? I think the boundaries piece is so complex because it trickles into every avenue of our lives. And when we talk about corporate America and people that might be entering a toxic work environment or in one, I think the starting point too is just checking in with yourself first and being like, what are the boundaries that I have for myself in my personal life? And what are the boundaries that I have with myself in my work life? Every new hire that we get now, I swear, and every time they come on, we do kind of intro trainings and I do a coaching program at my job now. I'll be like, set the boundaries right now, block off time in your calendar. Like, no one told me those things when I was new. I did not have a mentor telling me those things. So I think in some ways, everyone is responsible for teaching that to each other, and also knowing that the way someone operates in their role at a full-time job is not necessarily how you have to. So just because you might be working in an environment or with someone where they don't have boundaries, it's not your job to live and show up the same way. Um, I guess sort of my last piece of advice too is something the corporate world's taught me so much about, is that it's not my job to manage other people's anxiety. And I swear that is what corporate America is. It's like everyone thinks we're curing cancer.
Oh, for
We're
real.
not doing that at my job. And I constantly am like, I understand that you have no boundaries and you haven't done the inner work and you're a really anxious, stressed out person, but that's not my job to manage. Therefore, I'm taking a lunch break. See you in an hour.
Yep.
It's really hard for people to do. And I think acknowledging that when you start doing it, you're going to feel uncomfortable about it as well as other people. But knowing that if you are in a role that you feel like your job's on the line because you need to energetically still give back to yourself and protect yourself, it's a really good moment to, yes, then be reevaluating. Is this actually a place that I should be staying in?
That's so real. I also feel like it doesn't help us that we very much all grew up in the like girl boss era
Yep.
where it was just like grind, rise and hustle and prove yourself and lean in. And like there was nothing about like, but make sure you set your boundaries and make sure you're like protecting your mental health. It was just like, you have to fight for your spot.
I
Yes,
think
yes.
people also get like addicted to that energy in a way,
Yeah.
like in my teaching community, like you don't
Chaos.
turn off, you know, like even
Yeah.
if you're not contacting administration, you're texting with your friends about how the school day went, and then you're getting on that high and you're getting this like outlet from something that you're missing in your life, and you're not taking the time to be like, I'm seeking out adventure or I'm seeking out
Mhm.
companionship. Instead, I'm just giving into this drama and this addictive, like, oh, I gotta keep
Negativity.
going negativity, because I'm not actually looking at the hard places and finding joy in areas of my life, because I've never allowed that to happen.
Mm,
100%.
preach.
100%. And I think something else to say on this topic, I just talked about this with a couple of my colleagues last week, is how can we also be comfortable, to your point of what you just said, Caitlin, too, of like, can we also get comfortable with just being good enough? Like
Hmm.
just hitting the mark of the role versus overextending, like even you said to me, like the boss energy, doing the most. Something I do now at my job, and I mean, I am, building new projects and trying to fulfill my passion still at my full-time job. With my current boss, when I pivoted to working with her, I was like, I am not going to kill myself in this role. I just want to be really clear about that. Like, I have very good boundaries, and being okay with like, I'm not someone, I do a really good job with what I do, but I'm not trying to, I guess, prove myself and kill myself and like overextend. And I think I see all these memes on Instagram and stuff of like, you know, if you're going above the job description, like you're already overqualified for the role or things like that. And there's truth to that. Like we do live, we've been raised in this environment where I need to overextend and do so much more and prove myself. And it's like, well, what if you're just actually hitting the mark and being okay with that? But I think for a lot of people, you know, there's so many of us that have these narratives and things attached to our identities of like needing to overachieve, needing to overcompensate, needing to prove ourselves to feel worthy and valued. And so that's a notion I challenge actually a lot of my colleagues to play with, is like, what if you just showed up and like did what you needed to do that day, but you didn't need to actually take on those 10 extra things all the time and, you know, signing off at 5 o'clock. And it's interesting the way internally that creates, you know, a whole new space for people where it can actually be really uncomfortable, but it's a space
Totally.
that you should lean into.
Yeah. And it's like you recognize like I am good at my job. I'm going to show up and I'm going to do a good job, but I'm going to stay in my job description. And like, yeah, maybe every now and then there is the time and the place with like, I am going to go above and beyond because like I know this is important, or I know that this is going to push me forward or whatever. It's the right time, but you're not just a yes man saying yes to everyone. Um, Okay, I want to switch gears really quick since we're coming up on time. So I know that you've been very candid on social media, on your podcast, even with a bunch of the projects that you do about your journey with body image and dealing with body dysmorphia. And now I feel like you're such a fun person to follow because I feel like you challenge so many things that society tells us. Like you recently posted something about embodying all the layers of your femininity and like leaning really into this and like connecting with your body. And I think that can be a really hard thing for women to do because we're like shamed about it from like the moment we're prepubescent, right? Like with crazy school dress code and being shamed if like we were just talking about this other day, if you know you're wearing a spaghetti strap. Like if I wear spaghetti straps in public still, I still feel like a principal is going to come up and be like, you have to wear this giant lost and found t-shirt. Like I'm like, oh my god, my shoulders are showing, I'm being a slut.
Right.
Like crazy. So I don't know, it's not really like a question, but I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about like what embodying the layers of your femininity like means to you, both like in practice and also like in like actual meaning, and like how you kind of came to learn this and be comfortable with this. And
Yeah. No, I could talk about this all day. It's like I'm like totally in that era of
Please
my
do.
life right now too. So oh my God, so much to unpack. I think, and this has been a big part of my healing journey last couple of years. And so with my stepping into that femininity and challenging those societal norms and all the things we've been told, yes, I grew up with body dysmorphia. Like this started for me at a really young age. I've talked about this at length on my podcast and my Instagram. And so I always had a challenging relationship with my body. Like it's always been a relationship of contention and just like a lot of things that have been uncomfortable. But what's really interesting is that I, very young, when you think about when you're a child and before all these things are fed to us and before we're told as women how we should look and act and be, I was very free flowing as a person, like just as a person, very free flowing in that feminine energy, fun, light. The word flow just comes to me, like I was flowy. And you know, as I got older, fell into relationships, you know, stuff with parents, it's like I lost a lot of that. And I started leaning a lot more into that when you talk about sort of feminine, masculine energy and like, right, the boss, you know, the boss bitch energy, like very much in my masculine energy all the time. And, you know, just performing, doing, not really surrendering, being, receiving, all these things we hear with the divine feminine energy. And so part of the relationship looking back with my body dysmorphia was obviously based off relationships, insecurities, but it was also really based off of this like disconnect to my body. And I look back now, and if we really are going to get honest, like even my really long-term relationship, like I used to feel shamed from like an intimate standpoint of like things that I wanted in that relationship, ways that I wanted to dress, ways that I wanted to be. I didn't feel like I could actually be my most sensual, feminine, empowered self, whether that was sexually, dressing, like just even how I showed up in my career. There was so much resistance around that in every partnership I was in. And so that created a really strained relationship with that feminine, flowy energy of mine. And then on top of it, I was also raised by, my mom, I think, has a lot of issues with that type of energy as well. And like, even how you said, Amanda, like, oh, wearing the spaghetti strap, like, am I dressed like a slut? And it's like, that used to even be my narrative too, around like, if I want to dress feminine and sexy because because I'm a beautiful woman and I want to embody this body I'm in, why do I feel ashamed about that? So there's like so many layers to this stuff. It was like body dysmorphia, disordered eating, also feeling really shameful about the fact that I'm actually a very like sensual person and all these things. And so the last like 2.5 years really put me on that path of healing this stuff. And it was through, it's so crazy because I've shared I have PCOS, which is like a hormonal condition, and it flares my body up from time to time. And it's something that was devastating when I got diagnosed with PCOS. But I've shared about this, that the silver lining of it for me was that it forced me to truly connect to my body and understand that my body talks to me, it communicates with me. Symptoms and things happening are literally my body being like, rest, relax. Oh, we have energy. And so similarly, in that journey, I also started feeling this intuitive desire to start integrating like somatic healing work into my life. Because I had had such a strained relationship with my body, I was being so called to dance. I was being so called to like this flowy movement. And so through salsa dancing and like just literally like moving my hips, it's like I opened up this space for this like flowy feminine energy. And then I started embodying my curves more and being proud of my body. And I think it's because I'm connected to it. So I feel like for a lot of women, the struggle is that we're just so disconnected from our bodies. And I could even be saying that, listeners could be like, I don't even know what it means to be connected to my body. Like when you talk about that, what does that mean? And I think for everyone it's different, but for me, it's like understanding that my body, it's literally a living vessel I'm in that's communicating with me. It deserves respect, love, honoring what it's saying to me, knowing that when things are happening, it's trying to communicate to me. And then I think that the love piece of our bodies too, that's going to fluctuate. Like one of the things one of my energy healers challenged me to do this last spring, I had a really bad PCOS flare up. I gained weight. I was in a very uncomfortable place in my life, like single, yet again, broke in this apartment. My life was a hot mess, all these things. And she's like, I want you to start walking around naked in your apartment like every single day. In fact, I want you to stop and look in the mirror when you're like disgusted. And I'm like, are you joking? But I was like, you know what? I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm going to do
what
this.
do you have to lose?
Exactly. And like plenty of days I was like really uncomfortable, right? Like more days than not, really uncomfortable. But I think the journey as women, it forced me to just get more comfortable in my body, to honor it, to see it as like this beautiful vessel. And I think with the feminine energy and challenging those societal norms, the more confident and empowered and connected I feel to my body, sorry, the more that I know people are uncomfortable and are activated by that. But like being confident and okay with myself and knowing that I need to feel good. It's not about other people. And so that's a long-winded answer, but I think it's so much about getting connected to our bodies and knowing that femininity, confidence, beauty, all these things I feel like women want, right? We like desire to feel and have. It is literally an energy. I don't care what anyone says. We have these beauty standards. They 100% exist. But when you think about people that radiate magnetism, energy, femininity, confidence, it's an energy. To me, it's never about how they look. It's never about what they're wearing. It's the state of which they're embodying. So I feel like I've been so proud that lately, especially, I've been able to embody a new energy that I feel like I've worked so hard to build, because my whole life I was just taught like, please don't be that way. Please don't be showy. Please don't be confident. please don't be comfortable. And now I'm like, F all y'all. This is the space I'm in, and it feels really good. And it's come with a lot of discomfort. But it's really empowering when you can stand in it.
I love that so much. I feel like that's like the theme of this whole episode. Like it's all gonna come with a lot of discomfort, but
100%.
all gonna be worth it on the other side.
Yeah, I say to like, it's funny, even the other day I met a woman by chance at just this, I was helping someone with a branding shoot, and coincidentally, she was about to probably be going through a huge breakup, 12 years ago, all these things, right? So afraid. And I'm like, girl, I have been you. And I'm like, it is always through the door of like petrifying fear that I promise you so much good stuff is going to happen. And I just think that when we look at our lives, especially as women, it's like the more that we can be taught to connect ourselves, the more beautiful and flourishing and fulfilling we will feel, and our lives will reflect that. So I think I just can't say enough to anyone, like try to lean into continuing, whether you're in a relationship, single, in a career situation, not, whatever it is, like how can you continue to build a beautiful, empowering, connected relationship with yourself? Like that is the priority. Because then that's just when you can make those decisions. You can lean into that trust. You can call those things in. You can embody different energies. I think it just continues to come back to getting connected to yourself. And it is uncomfortable because we're not taught to do that. And you have to face oftentimes parts of yourself that might come with pain and resistance, but knowing you're worthy regardless of those things, right? Knowing that through that discomfort, you're going to find so much beauty on the other side. And I just think the last thing I want to say about that is like not being ashamed of all of who we are. I think that's the biggest thing with all my clients, right? They are like, there's so much shame around who we are, like, or parts of ourselves, or I can't believe I acted that way, or I can't believe this part of me exists, or why am I weak, or why am I this? And it's like, when we can learn to stop shaming ourselves and instead come from a place of being open-minded and compassionate and curious.
Yeah.
That's when you can start to lean into those things and feel more empowered.
Yeah, absolutely. My dear therapist, Karen, always reminds me when I'm feeling shame for like past decisions, ways I acted, whatever. She's like, that girl was doing the best that she could with what she had, as you were doing today, but today you have more tools. So like ditch it because that's not serving you at all. No, I love literally everything you just said. I feel like, yeah, whether you're single, whether you're in a relationship, I think even so much, not so much more important, but so important to remember to continue as much as you can, you know, connecting with yourself and working on your relationship with yourself and your body and all of that. It's so important when you're in a relationship too, because it's easy to like check that box and be like, I'm good now.
Yep.
We got it. Instead of like checking in to make sure, like, are you still taking care of yourself? Is this relationship serving you? Like you're still there. Like prioritize yourself or else no one else is going to. I feel like this whole conversation was just like such a breath of fresh air.
I know, it's been so great.
This was fabulous. I think I could talk to you we should just go on vacation together so I can just,
Yeah.
I need you more than this.
We can do it again anytime.
Well, hey, if we end up doing a retreat next year, I feel like
please call me up.
You'd be a great gal to chat with some girlies.
Seriously.
Please call me up. That's on my list of things to check off at some point. So
that would be awesome. No, I feel like I could get emotional, even just like having these conversations. It's so powerful. And I feel really lucky that we as a generation are making these conversations happen and normalizing so much stuff. And I feel like, you know, like you were saying, like your mom being uncomfortable with certain things. And like, I feel like our parents weren't lucky enough to like live in a time where you can gain so much power and perspective and connection by just opening up about all this stuff. And it's so important. So 100%. I appreciate you. Do you want to hype yourself up? Where can people find you? How can people work with you? All the things.
Yeah, I mean, tune in obviously to this episode. I mean, my podcast has been really exciting, the Make It Make Sense podcast. So tune into that. You can find on Spotify, and I need to get it on Apple. That's been on my to-do list for like 2 months at this point.
We're doing our best.
Yeah, we're doing our best. That's really what I have been super excited about lately. I mean, my Instagram, Izzy.Atkinson. I share so many different things on there. There will be some coaching opportunities in the near future. Not going to really sprinkle anything about that so much so right now, but definitely in the near future. But follow me on Instagram. I share workshops that I'm hosting, events that I'll be popping up at, of course, new episodes. And just, yeah, I'm always sharing this type of stuff that we're even just talking about. So I would say right now, those are the things, ways to find me and connect. And, some big ideas for 2024. So I guess stay tuned for the new year.
I love it.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both so much.
Yay. All right.